everybody, Mr. Waller here, back at it again. This week, we're going to be talking about plot. More specifically, we're going to be talking about Freytag's plot structure. When we're talking about plot, we're going to be using this diagram to help us out. Freytag's plot structure. Who is Freytag? Well, he was a German playwright named Gustav Freytag in the 19th century. And of course, because if you're the first one to come up with it, you're going to slap your name on it right away. Bam! Freytag. Now, Freytag made this structure knowing that there were 7 plots on here. We're only going to talk about 5 though. The first part of this diagram is this red line here, the exposition. This is all the background information we need to know about the story before we can really dive into it. This is all of the information the audience needs to know about the setting, the story, the characters, before they can really experience the full story. Who is who, what went down, and what do we need to know? Oftentimes it looks a lot like this.
Long before the birth of light, there was darkness. And from that darkness came the Dark Elves. Millennia ago, the most ruthless of their kind, Malekith, sought to transform our universe back into one of eternal night.
Tell me a story.
Which one?
The story of home.
Millions of years ago, a meteorite made of vibranium, the strongest substance in the universe, struck the continent of Africa, affecting the plant life around it. And when the time of men came, 5 tribes settled on it and called it Wakanda.
It began with the forging of the Great Rings. 3 were given to the elves, immortal, wisest and fairest of all beings. 7 to the dwarf lords, great miners and craftsmen of the mountain halls. And 9 rings were gifted to the race of men who above all else desire power. For within these rings was bound the strength and will to govern each race. But they were all of them deceived, for another ring was made. In a land of Mordor, in the fires of Mount Doom, the Dark Lord Sauron forged in secret a master ring to control all others. And into this ring he poured his cruelty, his malice, and his will to dominate all life. One ring to rule them all.
As you can see, the audience needs to know a lot of information before they can really experience the full story in order for it to be successful. The next part of the diagram is this very important orange line. This is conflict, or the rising action. It's called both. It's incredibly important though. There's a reason that it is the biggest line on this diagram. If your conflict is weak within the story, then the whole story is going to fall apart. Think of it like a roller coaster here. The more the incline goes up and the higher up it goes, the more intense the feeling is afterwards, right? Conflict is so important to the story. It's important that you figure out all the different types so that you know how to make the best story possible. In storytelling, in literature, there are generally 4 different types. Let's break them down really fast. You go away for a minute. We need to break this down. The first type of conflict is character versus character. The hero versus the villain. 2 different ideologies clash against each other, and that is our first kind of conflict. The most common form of conflict we see in storytelling. 2 different ideals and characters clash together. The next conflict is character versus self. Character faces the conflict within themselves, within their own ideology, that causes this sort of conflict. Whether a hero is suddenly becoming a villain, or whether a villain suddenly becoming a hero, well, you're both. Okay. This can form this type of conflict within a character's own self. Hamlet is a great example of this. We'll be talking about Hamlet a little later on this semester, don't worry. The next conflict is character versus nature. This happens a lot in mythologies. For those not familiar with the Disney-approved version of Hercules, Hercules in the original Greek myth has 12 different labors he has to accomplish in order to deem himself worthy again of being called a hero or a god. A lot of these labors are based on him taking down some sort of beast or animal within nature. Animals also represent a certain force of nature, hence why Hercules becomes such an amazing hero. Nature can also be anything outside of a character's force of control, like sickness or disease. That's the best way to describe nature, is a force outside of a character's control. The last kind of conflict we're going to talk about is character versus society. This often takes the form of an oppressive government or a tyrant. It can also be a character versus a majority of society that they no longer agree with anymore. Now that we have a full understanding of conflict, let's move on with our plot structure. Come on back. Come back. I know. I'm sorry I sent you away. I'm sorry. Now at the top of our diagram here, we have this little yellow point. It's called the climax. Climax can get a little confusing because it has so many different definitions. We're going to talk about a couple of them so you have a good understanding of them though. When a story reaches the greatest tension between the protagonist and the antagonist, that is what causes our climax. The two armies finally clash together here. The hero and the villain finally fight together. It's a fight that finally ends your favorite ship. Sorry.
Never do it again! I died that day! You can die too for all I care!
Oh! As you wish.
Oh, my sweet Wesley, what have I done? Ow!
The climax can also be a turning point in the story. Anytime things take a sudden and drastic shift, that is a climax. Stories, of course, can have more than one climax. Keep that in mind as we go forward. These usually come towards the end of a story and are the tipping point of everything. Now I threw in some new words there. Protagonist and antagonist. Protagonist. Most people recognize this as the main character of a story. It's the hero, it's the person you're following, it's the person you root for, right? That's protagonist. The antagonist is usually the villain. It's the person that's going against the protagonist. It's your main villain of the story, right? To be more specific, the protagonist has a central goal for the whole story. Throughout the whole plot, throughout the whole story, the hero is trying to accomplish something, and the antagonist is the one going directly against it. Let's look at a quick example here with Aladdin. Aladdin's main goal throughout his story is to get with Jasmine. Aww. Jafar here is obviously the antagonist of Aladdin. He's trying to rule Agrabah, and he needs Jasmine to legitimize his claim to the throne. So we have protagonist Aladdin, antagonist Jafar, they clash, boom, conflict, and we have ourselves a cut and dry protagonist and antagonist. But it's not always that clear. Let's look at this quick little thing. Let's look at the first story of the Harry Potter series. Sorcerer's Stone. What is Harry's goal? The question I want you all to ask yourselves right now. What is Harry Potter's goal in the first book? Take a minute, pause the video here, write down a question. Welcome back. Hopefully you've written down at least one goal that Harry has throughout the Sorcerer's Stone. Or just to go to school or to fit in, whether it be trying not to develop childhood trauma from his abusive aunt and uncle, and everyone reminding him that his parents were amazing, even though they're dead. Harry does not have a very clear-cut goal, does he? He's just trying to live his life, essentially. Now, let's look at the antagonist, Voldemort, here. No, wrong Voldemort. We need book one. There we go. Okay, canon now. So, Voldemort has a very clear goal. He wants to come back and kill Harry. Harry ruined his reputation as a dark wizard. A little baby took down the worst guy they'd seen in history. So, Voldemort wants to come back and take over. So his goal is to reinstate his power by killing Harry. Now let's look at their two goals here. Does Voldemort actively try to go against Harry's goals? Any ones that you list here? Not really, no, does he? All he's trying to do is take out Harry. He's not trying to ruin his Hogwarts experience or develop more childhood trauma that he already has. Or if you flip them, if you make Voldemort the protagonist, it makes a lot more sense, doesn't it? Now Harry, just being alive by breathing, is going against Voldemort's goals. So if you think about it in a certain way, Voldemort is the protagonist of Harry Potter 1 here. It's not always the most clear on who is the protagonist and who is the antagonist. Whose goal is it to get accomplished throughout the story? Moving on in our diagram here, with the green line, we've got falling action. It's the change after the climax. It's to show how our characters have changed and how the world has changed since this giant climactic moment. How are they settling in? How are they adjusting to this new normal they're in now?
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy! And you are an old man and a fool!
There will never be a wiser king than you. Or a better father.
Things are slowing down in the story now that we are reaching the end. Final line here in blue is the resolution, or the denouement, a fancy French word for saying the ending. It's the last image you want to leave your audience with before you finish off the story, whether it be happy or traumatic.
I don't want to go. I don't want to go, sir. Please. Please, I don't want to go.
Too soon? Oh no. So there you have it. That is the full Freytag plot structure. That is also the 4 types of conflict. And that's also what a protagonist and antagonist are. We went through a lot today. Pat yourself on the back. Go on. It's okay. No one's watching, hopefully. Done? Practice this whole week writing and performing stories with a full, complete plot structure. Every story, every scene, everything you do the rest of the semester is going to have all 5 of these in it some way. So make sure you have a full understanding of them. We'll be practicing this all week, so don't worry about that. If you're in class now, I turn the time over to your in-classroom teacher. Have a great day, everyone. Bye!